All right, so let's kick this off. Welcome everyone to Nx Launch Conf. It's the first edition of that type. We had some online light confs a couple years ago, so we want to pick up that tradition again and have that hopefully more often. I have with me two people that you probably know, Zack DeRose and Jeff Cross. So Jeff, maybe introduce yourself for those that don't know you yet.
All right. Hey, I'm Jeff. I'm one of the founders of Nx and the CEO. Programmer by background, but now I don't know what I do anymore. I just kind of work and try to make the company good. And this is my friend Zack, who used to live in Arizona with me, but no longer does for some reason.
Jeff kicked me out, so it's all right though. I'm Zack. I'm an architect here at Narwhal or Nx. Sorry, forgot the rebranding. But yeah, you probably see my face on the thumbnails or whatever. I'm usually like making some funny face like.
We're still like legally Narwhal. We haven't changed the corporate, so we're just like Nx as a brand, and we still have Narwhals everywhere in our marketing and promotional materials.
Oh, we don't want to abandon those nice Narwhals.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to do that.
Yeah, I love Narwhals.
Yeah, I'm Juri. As Zack mentioned, like you probably see me around as well with him on a lot of our YouTube videos and content that we push out. And I have the pleasure to introduce the Nx Launch Conf today together with these folks. We have already the launch week going the whole week. So you might have seen like some of the launches on Monday, which was the new Nx Project Crystal. On Tuesday, we had Nx plus Nx, which I'm very excited about personally because the Nx project is really cool. Like it gets a lot of traction, has really, really cool maintainers and that care about community, kind of share some of the values that we do. On Wednesday, big launch of Nx Agents, which is our way of how we want to rethink how CI works for Monorepos. And so you might have seen that. If you haven't heard about these things, check out our socials. So on X, Nx DevTools, on YouTube, same handle, Nx DevTools. But you can also just stick around with us today because we will dive into a lot of these things much deeper today, right? So we have a couple of talks that go into Project Crystal, some actually hands-on things going on there as well, like where we kind of dive into code, and also some secret announcements. But like Zack, I guess, has some more insights there.
Yes, I have. There's some secrets that's coming in later, but one of the coolest things about working at Nx for me is the people. So we've got a great talk by Juri coming up next. We'll introduce that in a little bit. But Craigory, good friend of mine, is going to be talking more about Project Crystal as well as the .NET plugin that he maintains, not as part of our work. He does that out of the goodness of his heart for the .NET community. So if you like C#, I don't get it, but you know,
so if you have complaints, go straight to him. Don't come
to
us.
Yeah, go straight to Craigory. Rareş, another good friend of mine. He's leading a lot of stuff right now in NX Cloud, so he's going to be talking about some of the new stuff with NX agents. Very cool there. Altan will be he's another guy that works on our NX Cloud. Good friend too. He's going to be solving end-to-end tests for us in CI, which I'm always excited about because end-to-end tests seem like the log stick inside the CI pipeline. So having good solutions there, I'm excited to hear that. And then of course James coming in with some more news about our new keyword on the NX CLI NX release that was launched last Nx Conf, the big one in New York. But we've been continuing to iterate on that, and James has got some cool new stuff for us to see. And then we'll see a special announcement from me, which won't be 20 minutes long, but it'll be interesting.
How many minutes will it be?
I think it's less than one. So.
Oh wow! Like, is that super short, super special?
Yeah. Well, you'll see when we get there. But yeah, I'm excited for y'all to see it.
So. By the way, I like that we don't have consistent naming conventions for our names here. Like it's my name, Zack's Twitter handle, and Juri's got both.
Yuri's too cool. Well, the thing is, Juri can't put his last name into anything because it's so long.
It exceeds the character limits.
We always see his name. It would cover his face.
You would never see anything on that thumbnail, that's for sure. Cool. In terms of collaboration and like interaction, John, like we want to keep people interacting with each other, right? So we have a Discord channel that is linked on the website directly. So you can go just to nx.dev/launch-nx and there you will find all the details, like to the video, the schedule as we were showing here, as well as a link to the Discord where you can chat.
Right. So yeah, so make sure you check out the link to the Discord, because I'll be hanging out in there and answering questions. Be sure you check out the pinned message at the top too, because that has our code of conduct. So we expect everyone to adhere to the code of conduct for this conference. So yeah,
cool. I also want to take the occasion to thank some of our community partners. So these are basically friends. Like we connect, since NX integrates so many technologies and we kind of interface with a lot of them, we want to make sure like the whole experience for NX folks works nicely with some of these tools. We chat regularly with many of them that are here on this page. So there's the folks over at Stackblitz, there's Nx Conf, RxJS, ThisDot, RSPack, Storybook, Chromatic, EpicWeb, and VidConf that kind of are friends with us, help us spread the news about like the launch next week. And you can basically check out their websites from our page here as well. Also make sure you check out EpicWeb, like that's behind Kenzie Dots behind that, which is kind of building up an entire empire around building great web applications. And they have a web developer conference coming up in April as well. So you might want to check that out.
Cool. So obviously super excited about everything that's about to happen here. There's a lot of work that came into all this. I'm excited most for the special announcement at the end. Jeff, what are you most?
You're excited for the thing you're going to announce?
Yes, yeah. What would that be? Mm-hmm. What are you most excited for, Jeff?
I'm excited for. I work with customers a lot, and so the thing that excites them the most is speed. And I'm really excited about the things we've already done to make CI really fast, and now the things we've announced this week that are going to make it even faster. Even things that seemed unoptimizable, that we found ways to make more distributable and to make CI faster. I think that's what really excites me. But everything that we're talking about is exciting. Like the thing you'll be announcing, like some big bets we're making in some new developments in software. The Project Crystal, where we've simplified the core and made life easier for us, for plugin developers, for end users, really makes it a lot easier for us to maintain high quality plugins and maintain the core and kind of make NX our own instead of how it originally started. So I'm really excited about all these things.
Yeah. Well, the Project Crystal here, I think that definitely opens up an entirely new generation of like NX here. So I think that's Juri. That's what your talk's about coming up next.
Yeah. Should I leave the stage?
Yeah.
prep for my talk.
There this whole time.
Many stairs.
That seems unsafe.
All right. See you on my talk then, folks. Have fun. All right, so let's get this started. I'm super thrilled with what I can present today, which is a really amazing feature that potentially revolutionizes how you will be using NX in existing monorepos as well as new monorepos. But before we jump right in, who am I? My name is Juri Strumpflohner. I'm the Senior Director of Developer Experience at NX. I'm also a Google Developer Expert and an ACAD instructor. But enough intro, let's jump right into code. So what I have here is a plain normal PNPM monorepo workspace. Now I chose to use PNPM, but you can use NPM workspace or Yarn workspace. It would work the same way. Now adding NX into such a reality is actually pretty straightforward. So you want to make it as easy as possible. So today all you need to do is run PNPM DLX or NPX if you're using an NPM workspace and exit latest in it. And this will scan your workspace and set up all the necessary stuff and ask you a couple of questions. Now, in the new version, starting with NX version 18, you also get a question about plugins. We will come back to this in my talk, but for now, let's ignore this and just deselect all of them to have a very, very simple setup to get started with. You will then get a couple of questions asked about the scripts that you have in your workspace, which I cut out here for the sake of making this a bit faster. But in the end, what we get is just a couple of changes in our file system. So first of all, we get NX installed as a dependency.
we also get here an NX JSON setup with a couple of useful configurations here. So if we look at the NX JSON here in this specific case, here we get a build pipeline setup. First of all, which targets are cacheable. So in our case, we have build, test, and lint. Now you can flip them as you like. You can add multiple ones. We also defined what is called here a task pipeline, meaning that if we have a dependent project, then if you run build on the parent project, it will trigger the build automatically for child projects. So common things that in a monorepo you would want to have. Now, how does this work now? Well, basically here we have in this monorepo a React Vite app. So this has been generated with the Vite CLI. We have a Remix app, which has been generated with the Remix CLI. And these come with their package JSON and dependencies as you would expect here. Now, since we have added NX, we can now just run all of these through the NX pipeline. And so rather than running something like pm filter, build, and React Vite here, we just run pm NX build React Vite, where React Vite here is the name of our project here. And so if I run this, this is going to trigger this specific package JSON script and run it through just as normal. Now, the important part is since we have defined it to be cacheable, you get caching now out of the box. Also notice, as we have said before, it ran also the build of a dependent project, which was automatically being recognized. So here, our React Vite project is dependent on a shared UI project, which is also living in this workspace, which needed to be built beforehand. And so that automatically happened with NX. And so you can see the adoption here in such a workspace is pretty straightforward. It's very minimal, but you already get a lot of benefits in the sense of more advanced task scheduling, which run in parallel in a more advanced fashion, taking into account also these dependencies between projects, and you get caching. That's it. But NX was actually always more. So NX lives in a huge ecosystem, and whenever we work with our clients in more enterprise field, it gets more complicated than just having a couple package JSON files. There's talk about consistency, about ease of setup, about easy onboarding, and scalability and maintainability in general. So NX is also known for its plugins. So this is the overall structure that we see in terms of the architecture of NX. At the very bottom, you see that NX block, which is the one we just used in that pm monorepo. But the plugins actually provide a lot of value. Now, these are just npm packages, but are very technology specific. So we can have some for React, for Angular, for Vite, for Vue, and so on, even for backend technologies. And usually these plugins augment your workspace by providing you automations. And so far that has been generators for easy code scaffolding, which can help with consistency in the setup. We have executors, which is basically a kind of a wrapper around the actual logic that is being run when you run, for instance, the build of a project, the serving of a project. So it does a bit more to make sure it works nicely in a monorepo. And we also have something that's called code migrations, which is pretty much undervalued, to be honest, which automatically updates your code base and brings you to the next version, limiting and lowering the effort that you have on your end. So again, as said, these are just npm packages. And so once you add them to your workspace, you now have these generators at disposal that allow you to generate something, or you have these kind of executors, those task running wrappers at disposal that allow you to easily build a TypeScript project, a React project, Next project, depending on the plugin you're basically using. So plugins are extremely powerful, and we've seen these being adopted at huge enterprise at scale. So they remove usually the friction between integrating tools into your workspace. They allow you to focus building and shipping features, mainly because of that. So you don't have to worry how React will integrate into Storybook and how Cypress or Playwright will hook into your app and make sure the app builds or serves beforehand. Things like that are already handled by those specific plugins. And that can help you increase productivity quite drastically. But clearly, there's also some learning curve, right? So it's no more just package JSON scripts, which at the same point, if you migrate to them, which is worthwhile, but if you migrate to them, it's kind of like a bit more tricky if you have an existing solution, existing reality, where you have, for instance, a pm workspace setup, and now you want to benefit from those plugins because you find them useful. And sometimes there's also a bit of that hidden logic, which comes with the abstraction layer, basically, that might be sometimes tricky to figure out. So don't get me wrong, NX plugins are here to stay. We find them extremely valuable, but it is about the balance between having more abstraction, more automation, more support, but a little reduced control about every little detail versus the no abstraction, no automation, or almost no automation, a bit less support, and you basically manage everything. You need to basically know what you're doing. And so this is the Nx init scenario, which we have seen just before, demoed in a PnPM workspace, while this is more where the plugins are right now. Now, obviously, take this with a grain of salt, but it's just roughly a visualization of how this is being distributed. So we at the Nx team have been thinking about, like, what if plugins would be more like VS Code extensions? So for example, if you have an existing project in VS Code and you add the Playwright plugin, it will automatically detect that there is a Playwright config and enhance your existing workspace. So you get like those buttons alongside the test that allow you to easily run them with the click of a mouse. You get a potential test explorer view, depending on what the plugin actually wants you to do or how it wants you to help. So the key idea there is to enhance, but not really interfere, because you don't have to use the Playwright plugin, even though you have it installed. But you can, and it will help you and enhance your whole developer experience while working in a workspace with a Playwright setup. And this is exactly what Nx Project Crystal is about. So let me explain. For instance, here we have a PnPM monorepo, the one that we have shown before, and we add the Nx Vite plugin. Notice we have added a shorthand, which is the nx add command. You can also install it manually as an npm package and then configure it on your own, but this will already take care of some of that stuff. Notice also how there is the Vite config down there. And so the Nx Vite plugin automatically detects that Vite config and enhances your workspace based on that. So let's have a look. So if you go back to our workspace here, I could run nx init again, and that automatically detects that there are these three plugins that could potentially apply to your workspace. Simply because there is a React Vite app, so the Vite plugin makes sense to have there. There's a Remix app, so the Remix plugin makes sense. And there is also some linting setup somewhere in here for instance, so that makes sense to also be added. Now I want to have it simple, and let me actually cancel this process and just add the Vite plugin to this workspace. So I use the nx latest add syntax and I add the nx Vite plugin. We will leave the rest of the workspace as is, so the Remix application will continue working as before. So once the plugin has been added, we can go and have a look what happened. So if you scroll down a bit, we now have in the nx.json a plugins configuration, which mentions the nx Vite plugin here, and it defines a couple of options. So specifically the names of the build target, preview, test, serve, and serve static targets. So these are some targets that Nx will automatically apply to a Vite project. Now, if we go back up to our React Vite project up here, we also see that Nx kind of replaced some of the scripts in here in the package.json. So rather than running Vite build, it ran now Nx build. And further down here, there's also some other changes where it ran Nx preview rather than here the Vite preview. Now you can opt out of that, but it allows you to potentially run the npm scripts while still benefiting from the caching, because now you run through the Nx build approach, which has caching enabled. So what did this plugin do for us? Well, we could potentially remove here all of this linting and previewing and def and whatever, and just run with the tasks that Nx automatically has inferred for a Vite plugin. So basically let the Nx plugin take care of some of that. So how do we know what targets can be run on a project? Well, here we have our React Vite project, and we can run pnpm nx show project React Vite. Let me add here -- web to not get a JSON output, but rather a more viewable output here. And so this now shows me what different targets are available for my React Vite app. So Nx found a build target, it found a serve target, a preview, and serve static target. So why would I want to use this? Well, because here the build target automatically already configured all the caching, the inputs of the caching, the outputs of the caching, and it directly did that by reading from the React Vite project and the Vite config in specifically. So let me go back and show that directly in the project here. If you have Nx console installed, which is highly recommended, you will even get some more enhancements, meaning you will see here the targets that are being inferred, so you can directly run them. You can run here the open product details or directly click here, which will give you the similar view that we have seen in the web interface. Again, showing you the different configurations that have happened here. So if I run pnpm nx build, even though I don't have a build script in here, and I use here React Vite, it will now run through the NX pipeline. It will build the dependent project as we have seen here, and it is cached, automatically being configured based on where Vite produced the artifacts and what files Vite reads into the compilation process. And specifically, the Vite config is an important part. While before you had to configure NX directly in terms of caching, potentially for a project where it read the input or output, now we rely on the single source of truth, which is here the Vite config for a Vite project. And so if you look here, we inferred that Vite by default produces the output in a dist folder that is in the project root. But you can adjust that. So you can here add a build configuration, and for some reason, you could change this to my custom out. Now by saving this, NX automatically recognizes that, and now the caching has automatically been configured based on this new setting. So you don't really have to worry about NX behind the scenes and how you configure the cache and change it potentially in two different places, but NX will directly read it from this Vite config, just as Vite reads the Vite config or just as Webpack reads the Webpack config. So by adding the plugin, it allows us to automatically configure the tasks by inferring them from the Vite config and understanding what the Vite project allows you to do. It configures caching for you, specifically configures the caching inputs and outputs based on what the Vite config has configured inside. And there's potentially more that the plugin could do. So this is the minimum layer that you can add with such an NX plugin. Now, how do we know which tasks are available? We have seen that already briefly. So the project JSON or package JSON could potentially be empty. And so we can run that show command, or which will show it in a web view, or we can have NX console installed, which again is highly recommended because it gives you much more benefits to work with it in an NX workspace, where we have these code lens features, as well as different buttons that allow you to then open that side panel view to directly inspect what targets are available there. Again, the NX JSON defines the names of these inferred targets, so you can potentially adopt these. So here, for instance, we have for a Next.js app, we see here the build, def, and start, and these are the ones that are being inferred in the next app. And below you see also the test for the Jest test, because there has been a Jest config in there, which is inferred automatically by the Jest plugin. Now, if you remove one of these plugins, the tasks simply are not being inferred, and you keep going with your package JSON or custom configuration. And this works exactly the same in a new workspace. So if you go here and create a new workspace, which I name here Project Crystal, and I choose pnpm. Again, you can choose whatever you like. And I choose here to have a React setup. I don't want to go with any specific ones, so with any specific framework, so I just go with a React Vite setup, and I want a Monorepo. I'm gonna choose Vite. Let's go with Cypress here, CSS. So once the setup is complete, and for those that have already been using NX Workspace, this might be a bit more familiar. We have here a React app that is based on Vite, because that's what we chose. We have a Cypress test, again, what we chose during the setup phase. And so in this setup, we don't have any package JSON, but we rather have the usual project JSON files that you're accustomed with in an NX workspace. So in one that's you're set up automatically from the get-go. And so the only difference here now that you might be wondering what happened is there are no targets. Because again, the configuration is very similar to what we have seen before. We now have the plugins defined at the more root level in NX.json. And again, these plugins automatically infer all the targets based on the Vite config. And so this helps greatly with the maintenance of these project JSON files, because you really just have to add things in here where you really want to override things. But all the default setup is already there for you. You don't have to duplicate it throughout the different projects, but you just add it when you really need it. Again, you can use the project details view. You will see, again, whatever is being run behind the scenes. Interestingly here also, and that was the same for the pnpm workspaces, we directly run the Vite build behind the scenes. So we are not doing a whole lot of wrapping, but we mostly pipe through the actual CLI behind the scenes. And so this greatly also helps with being more transparent. So to add some more things here, what we can do is we can add, for instance, the next plugin for NX. So let me here add NX latest, add NX next to add the next plugin to our workspace. And this will give us some more possibilities to add Next applications, and we configure the Next plugin to potentially recognize existing Next apps that are within this workspace here. And so if we go and give a look, what happened is we got obviously the Next plugin installed here. It also installed Next itself clearly. And if we scroll a bit down, we will see that we have the new Next plugin configured. Now, this gives us an opportunity to either via the command line or with Nx console to generate a new Next application. So let me go ahead and say here, Next app. The directory will be the app's Next app directory. Let me choose here, I want to have the app dir. Let's choose Playwright here. And we can leave the rest as is. And so here what we got is a new Next app generated into our workspace. It uses a normal Next config. Again, the project JSON is empty. We can again see what targets are being inferred here, which will again directly rely on the Next config that we got generated here. And we also have a Playwright test which works for that Next app. So you can see that whole experience that we were always kind of accustomed with Nx plugins still works in such a workspace, but is now enhanced. And so one thing that also greatly helps, which before was always kind of like a situation which we didn't really like and wanted to find ways to optimize, is it allows you to more easily migrate to Nx plugins. So assume you have that PnPm workspace and you have an existing Nx workspace that leverages much more the plugins as we have seen just now with the React app and Next app. But now we want to move in one of those apps that come from that PnPm workspace, for instance. So let me show you. So I'm again back here in my PnPm Monorepo. Let's say we want to move over that React Vite application to our Nx workspace that we have seen before. So let me remove here some of those bigger files and then copy the entire React Vite folder here and move over to our apps folder and paste it in. Now this workspace here uses a single version policy, which is a setup that we prefer with Nx, but you can totally also use a multi-version policy, even in this case, by setting up a PnPm workspace in here and have some sort of mixed situation. But I want to go a step further and remove this package.json from our React Vite app entirely. Now notice here, I don't have any specific library set up, so you would need to kind of obviously take care of that to hoist them to the root level package.json and make sure they are aligned. So there's more work needed here. But this is an early version of showing you all what is potentially possible down the road with these new enhanced Project Crystal plugins. So let me remove entirely that package.json. Now, there was also a shared UI package that we had in the PnPm Monorepo, which we don't have anymore. So for now, for sake of simplicity, let's just remove that. Now, in order for Nx to understand that this is a project, let me copy here the project.json, but we'll keep it simple and empty, basically. So the name here is React Vite. This is the folder. And you can already see now Nx console infers all the targets for us. Because it detected that it's a project, it found that there's a Vite config with the different build setups. You can already see our custom configuration, so it read that properly from that Vite config. And now I can go ahead and in this new repo, just run pnpm nx build React Vite, and it would build my Vite app, as I can also just go ahead and serve that Vite app. So you can see how we copied that over. Now, obviously, this is a more simple example, as I mentioned earlier, but it shows the potential down the road as we keep improving these Project Crystal plugins. Now, there's one more thing that I want to show you, because it is not just potentially about configuring caching and inputs and outputs and kind of syncing that directly from the config file. Plugins can potentially do more for specific situations. So if we go back to our workspace here, and I can choose an arbitrary one, we can see here in the Next app, we have this Playwright config. And we have in the Nx.json a Playwright setup configured. And notice I showed it to you with the Playwright config, but it works exactly the same way with the Cypress one. Now, if we go in here and choose here the product detail view, we'll see there is a lint target, an end-to-end target, but there's also a specific end-to-end-CI target, which filters or runs on a specific file, in this case, on this example spec file. And what it means is Nx is able to not just, or this specific Cypress or Playwright plugin is able to not just generate targets for the whole end-to-end run, but potentially create more fine-grained targets dynamically for each file. So let me show you what happens if I copy here the example file here into example 2. Let's go in here and say example 2. Let's here go to the playwright config file and then open here the project detail view. And now you will see it now has 2 of them generated. So why is this useful? Well, this is useful for being able to distribute at a much fine-grained level. So in this case, for instance, I can say now run many target end-to-end CI, which was that specific target that we've shown. Now let me run it with parallel 1 so I don't get conflicts with serving the project behind the scenes with the same port. And now you can see it runs the end-to-end test for a React app, which is just a single one, but you can see it runs that single CI, that Cypress file, and passes that to the Cypress config. And now it runs the same thing for our next app in the playwright test, running first the example spec and then running the example 2 spec. And again, this doesn't just work in here a workspace which I have generated with NX. Let me switch over here to another one, which is an Epic Stack workspace. And let me add here the playwright plugin. So let me run NX at latest init. This is an npm workspace, so an npm app. Now I don't want to use ESLint, Vite, or Remix. I'm just curious or interested in that playwright sharding. I don't even want to use NX in our package.json, and so let me just set that up. And so once it's configured, let's look at the changes. So what we see here is the NX JSON obviously that got generated. We have here NX being installed as a dev dependency as well as the playwright plugin, which we chose to install. And here the playwright plugin is being configured with an end-to-end target name. So if you want to have a quick look of what project here, or what tasks have been inferred here with this project. Now the project name is this one here. Let me double check. Yeah, it matches. So let's open that on web. And so you can again see we get the end-to-end test, but also we get all these individual tests here, which are present here in this Epic Stack test setup. So if we go here in the playwright test folder, you can see all of these. And so again, without even adding anything else, it allows us to run all these end-to-end tests, and it will run them one by one. Now, why is this useful? Well, because usually on CI, a huge end-to-end block are the most problematic one because they need to run in one go. And if you want to distribute tasks, especially across different machines, you always have that big block. Now with this feature, what you can do, or what NX allows you to do, is in combination with NX Cloud, allows you to more fine-grained split this up into these individual tasks where it runs the playwright test or Cypress test per file, and it can distribute them much easier in a much more balanced way across different agents. So this gives huge benefits on CI. We've seen examples that go from like 90 minutes down to 10 minutes based on such a distribution mechanism. All right, but so the main core part for NX Crystal is, first of all, introduce more transparency, because now these plugins mostly just pipe through the underlying CLI, so Vite build or Remix CLI and so on. This also reduces the maintenance burden on your end, specifically also because you don't have all these project JSON files potentially in your workspace with this overhead of configuration, but you just have the default setup and you just override what you need to override and customize what you need to customize. And still, we enhance your experience. As we have seen by dropping in Vite, you get automatically the caching configured based on the Vite config. We've seen some examples here of Playwright or Cypress, which works the same way, of automatic almost test sharding. And notice this works for all the tasks, not necessarily just end-to-end tests. It's just the most common one. And we have seen also how such an approach makes adoption much easier. So our goal with Project Crystal is to keep improving it in the coming months. So this is just the first release. And right now we are probably around this area if we look at this balancing graph that we have brought up initially. So it is not exactly the same where NX just picks up your package.json scripts, but it gives you some more abstraction and some more help already in the sense of configuring automatically caching, all that stuff that we've seen. But we plan to potentially keep improving it a bit more over the next couple of months. But you can still see it will still be kind of like transparent for you in the sense that you can remove it or add it much easier than it was before. So if this sounds interesting, definitely also check out our YouTube channel where we have much more deeper dives into some of these aspects, and we will keep publishing them over the next couple of months. And get in touch. Thanks.
Well, cool. Juri, thanks for the talk. Project Crystal is something I've been looking forward to for a while. I talked about sort of like the adjacent possible on Twitter, that that things that we're doing at NX unlocks, and things like, you know, atomizing tests or some other things I'm really excited about, I think are just around the corner, all unlocked by, you know, the work that we're doing here in Project Crystal. So
Yeah, 100%. Like I feel like this is, I mean, it's probably one of the biggest changes that we landed in the Nx, like for a while. I mean, we had some inference API before, but that was kind of like a pre-step until we came to like what we call Project Crystal, which kind of I feel like was always like the deeper thought through approach of that inference API, kind of like the which is also why we called it kind of like version 3 at some point. Like it was like an internal code name that we had for a while.
Well,
but yeah,
version
I'm fully
2, I think, was actually a really big deal too. So before, for people who are maybe new to NX, before we had a workspace JSON, and that for some of our clients, this was like 30,000 lines of like
it's
config.
not manageable.
Yeah, and anytime someone would touch any of it, like the whole cache gets busted. It was a mess. But pretty much every project was inside the workspace JSON. And one of the biggest things, I think this was version 2, technically what we did, was switch it up so that you could have project JSONs located inside of your project. And then NX would look to find those and know, okay, that's where to find my projects. Whereas before, if you wanted to find a project, it had to be inside that workspace JSON file. So
yeah,
that was a huge change. I think this one's even bigger just because of the things it unlocks. Like
it's a door opener, in my opinion. Like it's a door opener
absolutely.
for so many possibilities down the road, right? Because even the fact that, and I kind of mentioned it a bit in the talk, like even the fact that we with NX you have these like package-based monorepos, which you can like those are the PnPm workspace things that you usually would have, right? And then we have the other version which we call integrated approach, which is the NX plus the plugins, right? And we keep telling people like plugins are fully optional, but at the same time we believe a lot like that they give you tons of benefits. But there was always that kind of entry barrier where like, well, now I have a product JSON and like, but I still can also load the package JSON script. So why do I need that and that type of stuff? And with all that Project Crystal does is like it helps us like reduce that to a super minimum amount. And I feel like even down the road, so this was the first release, but I have already some thoughts like going down the road, like a couple months, like the next releases of NX, where this can go even better, where you wouldn't even notice like those difference between like a package-based and integrated monorepo, but you simply have like your PnPm workspace, just as you do now, add an NX on top, but also add like an NX plugin on top, maybe the Playwright one or something that can then enhance or make your life easier, basically integrate Playwright into your existing solution. So yeah, I'm really hyped for this.
Yeah, like one of the things, this is something Ahmed really likes. So Ahmed's from the TRPC team. He's done some live streams with us before. Likes NX. I think he still likes NX. I'm pretty sure he still likes NX. It's been a while since we talked. But he was really into wanting to have like generators for package-based repos, because
100%.
that was one of the big things that seemed to be like obviously very helpful, but something that was missing. I think that's something that Project Crystal unlocks, because now with removing all this stuff, we actually remove a lot of the opinions that we had to put into integrated. So you can still have your integrated approach, but now like all the tools that we have, like our generators especially, I think are very, very relevant to, you know, package-based or people using PnPm workspaces to do that kind of management in their repos. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, you can right now, technically you can already create your custom generator. That already works. But my like anticipation, something I've shown also a bit like in the talk, is how you can use one of the existing plugins that we have. Let's say like Playwright or Cypress, just add it and generate the Playwright setup into your product that works with the Vite setup that you already have, like for the React app or Remix app or whatnot, right? So that is pretty exciting, I feel. So yeah, I think we should jump on to the next talk, which I think goes a bit into that direction. Yeah, it's even more exotic because we're talking about .NET, right?
Yeah, so in some ways, like it felt like when we first started bringing out the Create Nodes API or Create Nodes API, like we kind of latched onto this as a way of like dynamically adding targets to a lot of projects inside of JS. But really, when we first started coming out with this API, it was to support, other languages, because other languages aren't going to, like .NET, I think in particular, has some conventions around it where it defines its own projects too. So that was kind of the goal for a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I'm looking up Craigory's .NET project here, nx.net, because they're always really big on downloads. I think they're at 10,000 right now. Let me see. 15,000 as of today, weekly downloads inside of nx.net. So one of our biggest third-party plugins, and huge props to Craigory. Looking forward to his talk.
Yeah, check it out.
Welcome to NX Launch Week. My name is Craigory. I'm here to talk about NX Crystal, the changes with that, and how it impacts integrating .NET and NX. I'm a software engineer on the NX core team, as well as the lead developer and maintainer for NX.NET, the plugin which integrates .NET projects deeply into NX's ecosystem. The biggest changes with NX Crystal came from a motivation of easing the adoption path for NX. Similarly, we were able to integrate a lot of that into NX.NET and ease the adoption paths. So looking at that, people come to NX and .NET and they want to join them for typically one of two reasons. They either have an existing NX workspace, or they have an existing .NET repository somewhere with any number of projects in it that people are already comfortable with, and they don't want to change a bunch when integrating NX. So if they already have an NX workspace, it's really easy. They can just go ahead and add nx.net/core. If they don't, though, they need to create one either via create NX workspace or using NX init to keep everything as it is in the current folder. Either way, after that, they'll need to add nx.net via nxadd at nx.net/core. Typically, with either of these paths, we see three different categories of hurdle. You have developers who are resistant to changing how projects are configured or where they go in the workspace. Developers are already comfortable with how they add new projects. They might be using templates within Visual Studio, and they don't want to have to tell NX about these projects. They just want things to keep working as they have. Or they see a lot of new configuration whenever adding these projects into NX that adds the mental load and things that they have to understand. All three of these are things that we've been trying to address with the changes to Project Inference and NX Crystal as a whole. So specifically, we're looking to minimize the changes to your project configuration, keep your workspace layout familiar, be that as a .NET developer or as somebody who knows NX. And we want to be able to rely on your existing tooling so that all of the configuration is handled that way, which is something you already know and already work with. In practice, this means things like adding a new project, you can use the NX generator to do. But if you already have a path that you're familiar with for adding projects, creating a new web API or adding a class library within your solution, you can do that and things will work automatically without any extra effort. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Here we have an NX workspace that contains a single React application. There is no .NET integration whatsoever. The only plugins we have listed in NX.json are the first party ones for Vite, ESLint, and Cypress. So let's get started by adding nx.net with nxadd nx.net/core. The first thing this command is going to do is it's going to install the package into the package.json with your existing package manager, and then it's going to run the init generator from nx.net. We see a few changes over in the sidebar. We see a new directory containing some tooling information, 2 new files to inform.net about how to build your projects, and in nx.json we have a new plugin where we have nx.net/core listed. We don't have a new application yet. And here's where things get kind of interesting. Like I said, we don't have to use the generators provided by nx.net anymore. We could be creating this project via Visual Studio, but in this case, let's just use .NET New. And we'll make a web API, and we'll put it in apps/backend. So we see the normal .NET output because that's what we ran. We don't see any output related to NX because NX wasn't running. And under the backend folder, we don't have a project.json or anything that used to be required. So now from here, if we run nx show projects, we can see that the backend is listed there. NX already knows about it. And in fact, if we run nx show project backend, and we look at the web view for it, we can see it already knows how to build, format, lint, and serve that project. So coming back into our project, we can now run nx build backend, and we have nx building your backend project. Caching is enabled, and everything is just kind of going to work from here. Now, going beyond this, we can see all of the configuration is exactly what you'd expect as a C# developer. Let's take a look at adding NX to an existing C# repo that doesn't have anything related to NX in it, and look at just how little we can actually change to get NX up and running. So here we have a real-world app from Thinkster that has a solution containing about 5 projects, it looks like. We have a build project with a build.cs proj, a conduit project with a CS proj, some tests for that project, and we want to get to where we can run these targets via NX. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run NX init, and I'm going to use NX's latest canary version because the crystal changes aren't released. By the time this is out, they should be. So you shouldn't have to do that. And the first question we get asked is, where should the workspace be created? If we tell it to create a new folder, what we're going to get is an NX workspace within our .NET workspace, and that's not exactly what we want. Instead, we're going to tell it to go ahead and just create this workspace in the directory we're in. And we can see it set up that installation in .nx. So the only things that we see created, we see this .nx folder. Our get ignore changed a little bit, not very much. All we get are a few new entries down here at the bottom to keep things from getting checked in. And then we get some very simple files to let you run NX, as well as the NX.json. In this case, there's no plugins yet, and we can see that we're on RC1 of NX, 17.3. So now let's go ahead and add nx.net. And we can use those scripts that we added to run it. We see that we're installing nx.net the same way that we've seen in the other one, but instead of changes to the package lock, now we get a new version of the plugin inside the installation property. And we see that it resolved. So now we don't see very many new changes over here, but nx.net is present. The biggest thing is we have our plugins array containing nx.net core. That is all we have done to add NX to this repo. And at this point, we can run NX graph to pull up the project graph. And whenever it opens, we can look at all the projects in the repo. We can see that it has found the build project, and additionally, it has found the conduit project and its test suite. And we can see that NX already knows the relationship between those. Additionally, if we pull up the view for a single one of those projects, so we can do NX show project conduit and look at the web view, we can see that it already knows how to build, lint, and serve that project. And we can also see that it knows it's a .NET project. And from here, we can also pull up conduit.integration tests. And we can see it knows that it's able to test that project. All while we've changed very, very little in the actual repo, we can see we only have the 5 file changes. And you have a working .NET solution where anybody who is already working in this repo is not going to have to change their habits. They're already going to know how to interact with it, and things will continue to work as they always have. So now that I've shown you a little bit of how this works, if you have further questions, feel free to reach out on Twitter or X. Feel free to look on my GitHub. Nx.net's up there. If you have questions or issues with this process, feel free to reach out. And the Slack icon's a little bit outdated there, but going to nx.dev/community will take you to our new community Discord. Feel free to reach out there, and we'll get you going. Thanks, everybody.
That was an amazing talk. Actually, whenever I see .NET, it gives me a lot of FOMO. I've been doing .NET coding for almost 10 years. Like a lot of WPF desktop, I think I was, web API, ASP.NET. So whenever I see Craigory mention or demoing his .NET stuff, I'm like, I need to try it out again. But now with NX.
I do not miss it. My first internship was all C# and .NET stuff. And I do remember liking it significantly more than Java, but I'm still really happy I'm not in that world anymore. Too many classes, man. Too much object-oriented patterns. Does nothing for me. But
yeah,
the thing that does something for me is watching Craigory just take NX and add it to that existing project. That was really cool to see. Doesn't really take much aside from just running NX in it, and you can get benefits there. You could get caching there. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I like especially the part where he showed the actual NX init on an existing .NET repo, right? Because in the end, you look at it, especially now that, as we said before, the whole Project Crystal part, what it enables us to do, to not have all those project JSONs mixed into all the CS project JSONs, I think, are from .NET. So to have them intermix, and people are like, why do I have now two of them? You can really see how this is now so unobtrusive. You have those, I think, 4 files that changed, right? Which give the high-level metadata about caching and stuff. But that's it. So I think that part I liked most, probably, because it's that seamless integration, right? So that it enables this.
Well, I feel like it makes these plugins that much more valuable too. Before, we would have plugins for the different languages, and usually this was just hey, let's drop in some generators here so you can have things set up, and they'll be set up for you. There is not much of in the way of generation that Craigory's actually doing there, from what I can tell. He's just doing more he built the plugin so that you don't have to change your project, as opposed to the other way around. Before it was you build the plugin so that you can change around the way people work to make NX work. And so now NX is more the one bending over backwards to make everything else work, which I think is really cool. It seems like such an easy path forward to bring in any other language here, just to have that kind of experience. And honestly, one of the things I love most about NX, the reason why I joined, is because of how cool it is to have your front end and your back end in the same workspace, and not have to deal with having 2 IDEs open, having 2 terminals you got to manage, or all this other stuff.
Yeah,
it's all just there together, and everything's kept in sync that way. So unlocking every back end languages, oh, that's awesome. Sorry, go ahead, Juri.
No, I was about to say, I see already, because you mentioned other languages coming up. I think the potentially a Rust plugin could come. John already has one, so that could be an interesting one. But we already have some half working, or fully working, actually, probably. I guess internal one, which is about Kotlin, because we use it on the NX Cloud team, right? Quite heavily. And so there was actually some thoughts already to kind of open source that out as a package that others could use as well. Because there has been quite some interest, because a lot of the enterprise customers we have have either .NET on the back end, or Java on the back end. Those are some big players, apart from obviously those that have Node, where it already works. But so yeah, that could be
well. And one of the other really cool benefits about this, I think this kind of leads it up into the next talk a little bit, is by going into NX, number one, you're getting really good monorepo management, really good repo management, really. But you're also pretty much giving, you're without knowing it, you're building the building blocks for your CI. So NX can take that and actually automatically optimize your CI for you. So yeah, and being able to do that, being able to optimize your builds for any language, I feel like that opens up a whole lot of opportunities for a lot of people to save a lot of time and save a lot of money. I know that's one of the things Jeff was saying our customers love. So
Oh, wow, I'm pretty convinced. Like saving money is a good thing to do for sure. But yeah, that's a perfect segue into the next talk that Rareş is gonna present to us, and I'm already super excited because I know Rareş has usually some really cool ideas always how to present stuff, and he's working actually. He's one of the core team members also on the NX Cloud team, which are heavily focusing right now on making CI better, making distribution better. But yeah, I don't want to take away too much, so definitely check out Rareş's talk, and you'll see us afterwards.
Oh, hi. I'm Rareş. I work on the NX Cloud team. And for the next 20 minutes, I'd like to talk to you about this single line of code. But we'll get to that in a bit. So, CI systems, like Circle, Jenkins, GitHub Actions, they're really good because they constantly test your code to make sure nothing broken gets onto the main branch. But they can also be incredibly frustrating when they become slow because your productive flow keeps getting interrupted while you wait to see if your code has passed all the checks. For example, let's say you're working on a branch. So you open up a PR and your CI starts running, and because it's so slow, it takes 40-45 minutes, you move on to doing something else. So you might move on to a different branch, you might go for coffee, I don't know. But then your CI fails. So you go to see what happened. So it's like, oh, it's that flaky end-to-end test again. So you decide to fix it once and for all. You fix it, you merge your changes onto main, and you rerun your CI on your original branch. And of course, it takes, again, 40-45 minutes to rerun the checks, so you might do something else. This can become tedious very, very quick. And I can assure you, most of your team is going through kind of the same experience. Having a slow CI really reduces your team's velocity and the speed at which you can release new features to your customers. It reduces collaboration, but can increase frustration. Today, we're announcing a new way of running CI with a bit of a shift in how you think about your task pipelines. We're calling it NX Agents, and it's actually been a while since I was so excited to talk about something. In the earlier days of programming, when most features were written in C or Fortran, you had to constantly keep in mind lower-level programming concepts, such as memory management. You had to keep track of what data you put in what parts of your memory. And if you forgot to clear it, you'd get memory leaks, you'd get buffer overflows, all these weird bugs. When languages like Lisp and then later on Java came along, they suddenly had this concept of garbage collectors. These smart algorithms constantly watched objects you created in memory, and if they found those objects were not being referenced anymore, they would just clear up the memory for you. We did not have to worry anymore or think about our underlying machine. If I wanted to put an item in a list, I could just do it without having to worry whether I've allocated enough space for that list initially. Because of these smart automated runtimes, instead of writing code for a machine, we could instead focus on readability, on writing code for other humans and telling them the story of our business logic. And there's a similar feeling about our CIs nowadays. We have a bunch of tasks we want to run. And because they're all running on the same machine, this will get slow eventually. So we create all these parallel jobs and virtual machines, and we just start assigning different tasks onto each one of those jobs. While it's a bit more complex in real life, it's usually some variation of this. So you might have maybe some builds on one of your jobs, some other builds, slow builds on another job. You might have a GitHub Actions job for tests, a GitHub Actions job for running your lint tasks, or anything else. And this is how that might look like. So you have some jobs, and each one of these represents a separate virtual machine. And we would put some tasks on one machine, and each one of them would have to check out the repo, set up Node, install dependencies, and then run our tasks. But some of these problems come in when you have something like this. So now that I want to upload my test results to SonarQube, I need to make sure I run this task on the same machine where my tests also run, and any other machine where I also have tests running. Or something like this, where you have end-to-end tests to run, but these end-to-end tests depend on the builds of the apps or libraries they are testing. So we need to make sure we run both of these on the same machine. And if any of these fail, or if we want to look at the logs, well, we're going to have about 5 or 6 different log streams that we need to look at depending on how many machines we've created. All of this is a very machine-oriented config. We need to always think about what's running where, are all the tasks perfectly balanced, is one agent taking more to run than other agents, and it's going to get especially complex and hard to manage for monorepos, because monorepos tend to scale very quickly, and they have a lot of complex dependencies between tasks within them. But what if we didn't have to think about distribution at all? What if we had something like those modern programming language runtimes that could figure out distribution for us? And I couldn't wait to get here because this is where I get to talk about NX agents. If we didn't have to think about distribution, then we'd put all of our tasks on this single GitHub Actions job, telling a story step by step of what needs to happen on each one of our CI runs. And of course, this might get slow as you'd expect. So let's say this would take even maybe 30 minutes to run all of our affected build, tests, and lints. But if I run this single command, and I hinted at it a bit earlier, but I will ask NX Cloud, instead of running on a single machine, to distribute all my tasks on 6 medium agents. Now, if I just add that single line, instead of this running in 30 minutes, it might now complete in 3 to 5 minutes because it's getting distributed. But how does this work? Let's take a look. So now when my CI starts running, it will just check out the repo, install Node, and when it gets to the distribution line, it will just make a quick HTTP call up to NX Cloud, and then it's going to continue installing dependencies. In the meantime, NX Cloud will spin up all these agents here in the background. And this is what NX Agents is. It's compute power managed by us running on our secure clusters. For the first time ever, NX Cloud can spin up CI agents for you. And turns out we can do some pretty cool things now that we can do that. And by the way, NX Agents is an addition to NX Cloud. It's part of the NX Cloud offering, just to be clear. So these agents will do their own setup steps now. So they might check out our repo, will do the npm install, just to get ready for what's coming. And then when our main job gets to this line here, and by the way, NX affected is a collection actually of all these tiny tasks that represent what's been affected by our code change in a pull request. Instead of running them, NX will instead ask NX Cloud to run them for us. And they will just start getting distributed among all these NX Cloud machines. Because all of these agents will have the same copy of your repo, the same node modules installed, they can get to work running all those tiny affected tasks that NX Cloud told them to run. And our main task? It will just wait there in the meantime. Remember, there's a live connection between it and NX Cloud. So as tasks finish, outputs our agents produce will start getting replayed back on our main GitHub Actions job. And I'll show you a demo of this in a bit. But when the agents are done running, we'll just pin them down. And GitHub Actions will continue running the next steps. And because all the build results have been replayed onto the main agent and all the test results are also on there, we can deploy a PR preview of our app using the build outputs of the previous task. We can also upload our test results to SonarQube. If I want to make it a bit faster, I could just increase the number of agents I want here. If I need more powerful machines, again, I can specify a different launch template. And just to be clear, NX Agents does just the distribution part for you, but you can still use your main CI to define your workflows and your tasks. So for example, this is how your Azure configuration might look like. Again, you have your tasks defined on there, and then you start the distribution command up here. This is how the Circle CI config will look like. This is how GitLab will look like. this is how Bitbucket will look like. So you can use anything you want, yeah, even Jenkins. But what are these? Well, we call them launch templates. And let me show you a demo of them. So we have this public GitHub repo over here. And here we've defined what we call some launch templates for you. So there are some instructions on how each different agents can be spun up. So for example, the medium ones, they use a medium resource class. So this defines what kind of resources gets assigned to your machine, like CPUs or memory, what kind of base image these agents should run on. So again, we'll have a few of these provided for you. So this will run on Ubuntu using some version of Node pre-installed, maybe some browsers for testing, for running Cypress or Playwright. And then they'll have some initialized steps. So they might all check out the repo, restore a node modules cache if there is any, install node modules if there's no cache there. So the goal for this is to try and have a few very common steps that will work for most use cases. And we want to work with you on this. So if you are going to have any custom use cases that you'll need, we want to have as many of these ready for you as possible so that you don't have to declare your own and you can just use one of our predefined ones. But let's see this in action right now. So let me quickly switch to my terminal and I will just push some changes that I've made. And I'll go back here. And if I go back to my pull request, I first want to show you this CI run that I did where I didn't have any distribution at all. So all it's doing is it's running my affected build, lint, and test. In this case, if I go to my main job, we can see that it took over like around 20 minutes to complete. And most of that time was spent running my affected tasks. So it took around 19 minutes to run that. If I go back to my pull request and I look at one where I enable distribution, so the only change I made here is that I added this line where I asked it to distribute on my agents. If I now go to the checks, this finished in 5 minutes. It's the same exact CI config, but with that line included. And if I open it, again, it reduced my tasks from 19 minutes to just 4 minutes. And of course, the effect will be even greater the longer your initial CI times are. And now if I go back to my pull request list, I'll see that there's this in progress PR happening. And on my NX Cloud web app, if I refresh the page, I can see there's an in progress CI execution. And we'll see here how long ago it started and the hash of the commit, maybe the branch where I started. I can click on here to go back to GitHub and see the exact commit that it's running. I can see who made the commit, how long ago. And down here, I'll see all of my agents. I can see that it's using my Linux Medium.js launch template that I showed you earlier. And these are all the steps that our agents are running, checking out the repo, restoring the node modules cache, and you can see all the different agents on here and how long it took them from the fastest to the slowest to complete that specific step. And I can see most of them are now running my NX tasks. And I'll go up here to this nice graph, and this represents how many tasks I queued up. So 400, like it's a lot. And how many have completed, maybe 72. How many tasks are still in the queue, and what tasks each agent is currently running, and which ones have been completed, and on which agent, and how long they took. So it's pretty cool. But if I scroll down, let's select one of them. So let's go to agent 2 that's currently running this build. It's going to take me directly to the logs where I can follow what this agent is doing right now. And I can click on different agents up here. So I can click on this one and see the logs for this one. So eventually it might run different tasks. Maybe this one, it's doing something else. Yep, so it keeps executing things. But the interesting part is, if I go back to GitHub now, and I go onto my main job, I'll see all these logs from all of my agents being streamed in real time back to my main GitHub Actions job. So we're using NX Cloud to replay all the terminal outputs on here. And that's why things like the JavaScript bundles or the test results will be available here. But there's one more thing I want to show you before I close this. If I go to the top again to my pull request, and there's this PR here, and there's a neat comment on here that I can click on, and it's going to take me directly to the page for that CI execution. And on here, I can see that it completed successfully, but some agents failed on the npm install step. And that could be possible maybe to network issues, or maybe npm had some issues at the time. I don't know. It is possible that sometimes some tasks might fail on your agents. But in this case, it still completed successfully because the remaining agents could pick up the remaining NX tasks. Of course, sometimes you might want to run your own steps. So maybe our launch templates are not enough and you want to run some unique step. So we got you covered in that case as well. You can define in your .nx/workflows folder, we'll define this agents.yaml file, which looks similar to the launch templates which I showed you. So we can give it a name. I'll call it, you can define a bunch of these in here, but this one I gave it the name of custom Linux medium. Again, you can define your resource class depending on how many resources you'd like to be assigned to that machine. You can define a custom base image. Again, we'll provide a few base images for you. And this one will check out the repo. It will restore the node modules cache if there's any. These are some predefined step templates that we created for you. And down here, for example, we are installing Rust. So I have a custom bash script where I'm installing Rust because my NX tasks will need Rust to be installed. So this is my custom defined agent. And now if I go back to my GitHub Actions definition, I can just use my own launch template in here. And by the way, I've always used this as a demo command, but you can also run as many NX tasks as you want on here. This is the interesting part about this. Once you add this line, any NX command that comes after it will get distributed instead among the agents that you made available to it. So NX will take care of the distribution for you. So why would we even go into managing compute? Because it's a pretty big jump if you think about it for a company as small as ours to make. But it turns out it's an extremely great fit given all the tools we've been building over the past few years. As an example, as all these tiny tasks get allocated to my agents, when you have a tool such as NX that knows about your dependency graph and how projects depend on one another, we can make sure we distribute the tasks in the correct order, such that those blue end-to-end tests there always get scheduled after the builds in the bottom agent have completed. We know that those end-to-end tests depend on those builds, so we can make sure to take care of task ordering for you so that you don't have to worry about it. And it turns out having a distributed cache like an xCloud is great for continuously replaying results from the agents producing build results to other agents that might need those build results, including replaying outputs and terminal outputs back onto the main agent as we have seen. And because we know from historical timings how long each task takes on average, we can try to perfectly fill in these gaps for you such that there's no idle agent time. And as mentioned, because of our distribution model, if one of these agents goes down, we can continue just fine with the CI run, distributing the remaining tasks among the remaining live agents. That's a problem with existing setups, because when you have your GitHub Actions job, for example, if you declare on that job that it's going to run these tests, there's nothing else that can run them. So if npm CI fails, your job will fail, so your whole CI execution will fail as a result. And one big problem with current CI providers is that once you declare your matrix of jobs and agents, it's pretty static. If you customize it for 20 agents, you'll always spin up 20 agents, even if you change just a single test file. You could make it a bit more dynamic. Some CI providers allow you to do that, but it gets really hard to maintain, even more than it already is. With NX Cloud, I can create a new dynamic sizing config file that will look something like this. So now, if I open up a small pull request, I'm just going to spin up 3 agents. If I open a medium one, I'm going to spin up 6. And if I open up a large pull request where most things get affected, I'm going to need to bring in all the agents I have available. And we know this because NX knows about your dependency graph and it knows what tasks have been affected in each PR, so it can calculate in which one of these 3 buckets your pull request might fall in. So that's it. Thanks so much for listening, and please check out the Getting Started docs on NX Agents. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Yeah, typical Rareş, always doing amazing presentations. I always love Raresh's presentations. That's cool.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I love like the ideas that he like, even just like starting with that paper in front of the camera and then jumping from out of the back. Like this is I love like his creativity when it comes like to presenting stuff. But even like I think that even presenting like his topic like NX agents and like the whole distribution aspect, it's not easy because like if you have dealt with it like already in a company, and I talked a bit to you about before, I'm so excited about it because about NX agents in general, and like that it is just that single flag, like that single line basically that you need to add. Because I've dealt with such stuff like for one of our clients, right, where we like use the NX programmatic API to dynamically generate pipelines on GitLab and then include those templates that we place in a file system, restored on the next step. So there was like a gigantic number of manual JavaScript scripts lying there to generate these pipelines dynamically. And clearly it was suboptimal because it was like we distribute based on like the type of like builds on one machine, like some of the projects like grouped by projects in on other machines. And it was like us tuning this as we were going. And as I mentioned to you earlier, like at some point I think there were like 3 or 4 people like mostly looking at that stuff, making sure this runs, because this is a huge blocker. Like if your CI pipeline stops running, all your devs cannot merge anymore. Their sprint planning is kind of completely out of sync at some point because they cannot get it into main. So this is like highly critical. So I see it almost like as the production system for devs to some degree, because clearly you don't affect your end users, right? And that's good, right? But you affect like your potentially a huge number of devs, right? And at that repo, I think we were like 200 devs or 250 devs working on that monorepo. So yeah, 250 devs sitting there like on Slack hammering, hey, CI doesn't work, I'm blocked, I cannot merge. Yeah. It's like, that makes you sweat, basically.
That's rough. Yeah. So there's also like I've worked on some clients in the past where like they were just heavily invested in things like GitHub workflows, and like we would legitimately. In some ways, it was kind of cool because we could actually take advantage of some of the UI there. Like there's the UI where it like will show you the different like machines that are running and what they're doing and like how they lead into each other and stuff like that. Was very cool until you had to start working with it or until something went wrong somewhere in there. Because as soon as that happens, it's like, okay, this was my job. You got to go in there and see what's going on and try to fix it. That was really hard versus like you just kind of use like really what you're using is NX as a platform for your task running and defining, hey, here's the task I want to run to compose or to create the CI assertions. Just let's make sure we run those before we merge this thing in to assert that we didn't introduce some catastrophic bugs or something like that. And that is so much easier to just hand it over to NX. Not only is NX going to make sure like we only run the runs we need to, but now using NX agents, if you're using that, you don't have to manage your CI aside from, really what Rareş was showing, which was you have one line to turn on the NX agents. And then after that, you just call NX tasks. Usually that's one run many commands. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the maintainability aspect is sometimes underestimated, right? I've recorded a talk for DevOps.js Conf, which is happening next week. So if you're watching, like definitely check that out. It's airing next week. And I touched on a similar part there as well, because like whenever you talk about monorepos, like you have that local dev experience, which is one thing, which obviously needs to be good, because otherwise like people will be devs will get annoyed basically to work in a monorepo. But the next thing immediately is that CI part, right? And I think like the one part obviously is the speed, right? You want to be, it should be fast and whatnot. But I think also the maintainability aspect, that's a big one, which is sometimes initially kind of underestimated, because you don't want to have necessarily like full team of folks just kind of making sure like that CI runs. And so clearly, if you can offload that, especially the distribution aspect, because even launching different machines from CI provider to CI provider can be quite different, right? So being able to like kind of externalize that, outsource that almost with one line, I feel like I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting to me just how if you create your NX workspace and you properly inform NX, like really that's what you're doing with some of the config that we have, is just defining what are the inputs for this task. Like what are the files that can affect this one task? What are the files created by this one task? As long as you put that in, then NX can come in and really just perfectly optimize everything that you need for your tasks in a way where, you know, there's no one who needs to think about it. Like as long as you're defining those things correctly, and that's going to help your local development too. So yeah, for a lot of devs, I know that's 100%. A pain point. It's just like figuring out, well, what do I need to do like to get this thing up and running? And especially when there's this weird convoluted thing where you need to remember, oh, I need to run the build before I run my tests or something like that. Like that whole thing goes away when you say, okay, actually the test depends on the build, and you inform NX about that. And then we're going to manage that. Like we're going to run that build every time before you run your test, or we're going to cache it for you so that like you won't need to remember I need to do that first. It'll just do it for you. So
yeah, and I think it's especially that knowledge, as you said, like that knowledge is like generic CI systems don't have the knowledge or the concept of a project graph, that type of thing, to be able to properly distribute, right? And obviously that's something we know, we work with like every day, so kind of bake that in.
Yeah,
but I think that we should segue into
So this is what I'm really excited about. Let's go watch Altan's presentation because so much cool stuff here.
Especially end-to-end tests is a big pain in CI. Like we all know about that.
Yeah.
So let's check that out.
Cool.
Hi everyone, my name is Altan Stalker, and I'm an engineer on the NX Cloud platform. There's been a lot of awesome announcements in the previous talks, so I hope I'm able to keep everyone's interest. Rather than talk about changes coming to all of NX or all of NX Cloud, like we've seen so far with Next-Gen NX or the release of NX agents, let's narrow our focus in a bit. We believe that as a part of those two changes, E2E tests are now solved for NX Cloud users. Now, solved is a bold claim to make. That means that us here at NX and the wider developer community must see large problems in the ecosystem that aren't addressed by existing tools. And let's face it, while the experience of authoring E2E tests has been markedly improved in the past few years with tools like Cypress and Playwright coming into the picture, running these tests can still be a painful experience, especially as your organization scales. The cause of this pain can vary from organization to organization, but in general, we can break it down into 3 challenges. E2E tests are slow, so your team has to wait to verify their changes are safe, which hurts velocity and momentum. E2E tests are flaky, so retries of entire pipelines waste dev time and effort, and company money through wasted compute or wasted dev time. And third, maintaining a pipeline that handles both of those is a lot of work, so organizations suffer from configuration rot that no one wants to take responsibility for. I'm happy to say that we have an answer for all of these that is ready for you to implement today. Now, after this grand introduction, I know that we have 2 types of people in the audience. Those who are already looking through our docs on nx.dev to get this enabled, and those who are still skeptical of my claims. Well, 3 kinds of people. We can't forget those who just started the stream and don't know what talk they've stumbled upon. In any case, I don't blame the skeptics. These are some lofty claims. Let's talk through what NX is doing differently to other tools that allows for these features. NX already takes a lot of steps to help ensure a fast experience in both local and CI environments, You may have already noticed how these help your CI times. The strategies taken differ a lot depending on where in NX you look. Consider affected. What's the fastest way to run E to E? The fastest way to run your test suites is to not run them at all. Using NX as affected can shave minutes or hours off of pipelines for large projects by simply understanding what work actually needs to be done and cutting the rest. But what about caching? What's the fastest way to run E to E when that's available? Well, NX can replay our tasks output if we've already performed the work locally, but that doesn't help much in the context of a pipeline, where we'd expect to have ephemeral machines. That's better. With NX Replay, we can share the cache amongst our whole team instantly. Now our CI pipelines can theoretically take advantage of work done by our machines during the normal dev flow. And if you've been around NX or NX Cloud for the past few years, nothing I've said so far is earth-shattering. Maybe it's not even interesting. So let's kick it up a notch. We heard earlier about inferred tasks, which arrived in NX 18. This feature allows NX to dynamically create targets based on the different configuration files that already exist in your projects. These targets get all the same features we just talked about: use of affected, proper caching, and integration to NX Cloud, with no extra config involved. Use Vite? Cool. More of a Webpack person? That works as well. But what about for E2E testing tools? Are they supported? Well, on the previous slide, we saw the basic and definitely mathematically sound equation of config from popular tools plus NX equals runnable targets. But that's changed a bit. Now we have config from your favorite E2E tool plus NX equals magic. What kind of magic are we talking about? With our example here, we have a project called My Project with a Cypress configuration file in it named cypress.config.ts. With inferred targets, the presence of a Cypress or Playwright configuration creates not one, but two targets for you. Once NX has inferred targets for us, we now have the following available on our Cypress project. One target is named E2E, a name that probably looks familiar if you're an experienced NX user already. This would run all of your E2E spec files as you would expect. The other target is named E2E CI, and it helps us achieve the magic. See, when I told you that two targets were created, it was a bit of a lie. There's no technical limit to the number of targets that can be generated on the fly, and we can use that to our advantage. Using NX's task pipelines and depends on, we can effectively turn E2E CI into a wrapper target that depends on the execution of all the individual spec files for a given project. This means that we can run each spec file in isolation as its own task. This by itself isn't a big deal. Playwright has allowed you to manually shard your tests for a while now. Where the real power comes in is from NX Cloud's distribution engine. With inferred targets and NX agents, the total runtime of your E2E tests can be bound by your single largest spec, rather than the combined runtime of all tests in a given domain. That means the ideal case for this project would be a total perceived runtime of 2 minutes, since that is our longest running spec. But what's even cooler about this is the flexibility it gives your team as you scale. We've added a large new feature, but the impact on our pipeline is much smaller. We've only added a minute of perceived duration, 2 minutes maximum to 3 minutes maximum per spec, instead of 3 total minutes for a monolithic E2E task. And adding additional specs might not impact our perceived time at all. Whereas with a monolithic target, we've now doubled our original runtime. There's been no additional maintenance, no additional configuration, and no mental overhead to achieve this. Simply swap your E2E target for the new E2E CI one. So with that, the duration issue of E2E tests is solved, and we started to crack away at the maintenance burden. Not bad for something that can be explained in a few minutes. But it doesn't actually matter whether my tests only take 3 minutes if I constantly need to check to make sure they actually passed. Flakiness in E2E tests is the bane of my existence. Your PR has been approved, you've fixed existing tests, and maybe even added new ones if you're a role model, and what are you rewarded with? A failure, because some element didn't appear in the DOM in time. The result of your test being contingent on a virtual coin flip isn't a situation that any team strives for, but it's sometimes an inevitability. Bugs happen in tests, services can be slow or degraded, and things just don't go to plan. How can NxCloud help here? Well, if you're a member of a team afflicted with flaky tests, you're probably bracing yourself every time you see that project in your affected graph. Fortunately, you aren't the only one who is aware of flaky tasks now. NxCloud will now detect flaky tasks for you automatically while you are running your commands. This means while a distribution is occurring, NxCloud is able to separate your tasks into two categories: flaky and non-flaky. How is it capable of doing this? Well, tasks in NX have three main parts: an identifier, which is normally comprised of your project name, the name of your target, and a configuration when specified; a hash, which is computed by NX based on the inputs you set in your target defaults or project JSON; and an exit code, so NxCloud can tell whether your task succeeded or failed. All of this information is recorded for every task in every run that ever crosses NxCloud. So how can we use this to detect task flakiness? Well, let's say I've run my task in CI. NxCloud becomes aware of a task with identifier myProjectE2E, a hash of 1234ABC, and a status code of 1. Now, since I've worked in this project for a while, I know this was a flake. But NxCloud needs more evidence before it can say for sure that this task is flaky. So let's give it another try. On run 2, what do we end up with? We have the same project identifier of myProjectE2E and the same hash of 1234ABC. But this time, we get a status code of 0. Our tests pass. Now that we've received two different status codes for the same hash, NxCloud has detected that this task is flaky. What does this mean for future runs? Let's picture a distribution run that uses 3 agents. We have a few tasks that we want to run: big project E2E, small project E2E, and the newly detected flaky project E2E. Now all of these can be assigned out to agents. And as we watch the pipeline progress, agents are working hard. Eventually, our tests complete, first with small project E2E, and then big project E2E. But what's this? Flaky project E2E failed? We should have expected this. We named the project Flaky Project after all. So what happens here? Is our pipeline failed with our only hope being a rerun? Not anymore. Because NxCloud is aware that this task may flake, it will do the following. The failed attempt of Flaky Project E2E may still be important, so we'll log it as an attempt. We will also add a fresh copy of Flaky Project E2E back to our available task list, where it can be picked up by a different agent. Now, Agent 1 will try to run Flaky Project E2E. Why a different agent? Well, there are many factors that could influence a task to flake, so we try to provide as fresh of an environment as possible when rerunning to rule out any influence a particular machine may have. And now, Flaky Project E2E is successful. NxCloud just saved me a manual rerun, which would have caused a lot of frustration, as well as a bunch of time lost to reinstalling node modules, setting up my pipelines, and pulling cache hits for tasks we already knew would succeed. And what's cooler about this feature? Although the focus of this talk has been E2E tasks, I'm happy to say that flakiness detection works for all targets. NxCloud paired with distribution can help any project overcome flakes. So far, everything I've told you has been theoretical with accompanying slides. Let's see how we can get test splitting and flaky task retries working in practice. Let's walk through the fastest way to get started with these features. To do that, first I'll create a new workspace with npx create nx workspace at latest. I'll call the workspace Launch Nx. I'll use React as my stack with no framework and an integrated monorepo. I'll call my first app App1, bundle it with Webpack, and set up my first E2E tests with Playwright. We want normal CSS, and finally, I want a GitHub Actions workflow generated and NX Cloud enabled for me off the bat. Now we'll speed up npm install and get back into it. Now that that's finished, with the power of movie magic, let's show off some other changes I've made. To do this, we'll open up the NX graph and navigate to the Tasks view. You'll notice that we now have 7 apps instead of the one that we generated with Create NX Workspace. If I go to the target name dropdown and select E2E CI, we can see that NX is aware of a different 7 E2E projects, and when I focus App 1 E2E, we can start to see inferred tasks in action. In addition to the E2E CI target that was selected, we can see all of our dependent tasks as well. For this demo, these are just sequentially numbered spec files with some dummy tests in each. Now, let's get distribution set up. When we ran Create NX Workspace, we asked NX to generate us a GitHub Actions workflow file. Let's see what we ended up with. Here we have a ci.yaml file in the .github/workflows folder. It's set up to trigger on push to main or pull requests, has some permissions configured for a helper action to make affected work more easily, and most importantly, has a main job with this line commented out. Let's uncomment it first. This command calls the NX Cloud CLI and tells it to start a CI run. By passing distribute on 5 Linux Medium JS, we are telling NX Cloud to create 5 agents to distribute across, each using our pre-made Linux Medium JS image. But 5 agents seems kind of small for 7 projects with 10 spec files each. How fast can we make this? Let's change that to 20 agents just for kicks. Before we commit and push this, it's important to note that use of NX agents requires a Pro Plan account on NX Cloud with an active version control integration. There's a generous trial available that I've activated for this demo, which is how we'll be running these agents. Check out our docs for how to get this set up. Time to push up and see E2E splitting in action. Before we show off the results of distribution, however, let's see what we were up against. When running all the projects and targets in our demo workspace, we can complete a CI run in just under 24 minutes on GitHub Actions. This isn't terrible compared to some pipelines, but we can do better. Let's see where we get with NX agents. With our 20 NX agents, we were able to take our pipeline down to just 3 minutes and 17 seconds in GitHub Actions. If we removed our npx playwright install step that ensures browsers are available for our E2E tests on the main job, we'd be at 3 minutes flat. Almost an 8 times speed up with 1 line of change. Now, obviously, this example is a bit contrived for the purpose of a demo, but these kinds of pipeline speed enhancements are not out of the reach of your projects. In addition to the speed improvements, we get several other benefits with the combination of NX agents and E2E splitting. While the distribution runs, we are able to see which tasks are assigned to which agent, how many tasks remain, and how many were pulled from the cache. This kind of observability mid-run is invaluable. We are also able to view logs for our individual agents by clicking these pills at the bottom of the CI pipeline execution details screen. Once our run has completed, we can view logs from specific tasks one by one. This is particularly useful if you are trying to diagnose a failure or a flake. And finally, we can view the various attempts of tasks that NX Cloud has detected as flaky. In addition to viewing per attempt, we can also manually set a task as flaky or resolved to bypass the automated detection step we discussed earlier. I hope after learning about these features and seeing them in action briefly, you understand why we think we have solved E2E tests for NX Cloud users. No longer is test duration the bottleneck for your CI pipelines. No longer do test flakes ruin your mood or your CI budget from unnecessary reruns. And no longer does the upkeep of your E2E suite require extreme effort. These features are here today, live, and are ready to be used by your organization, and you can sign up today at cloud.nx.app. The NX and NX Cloud teams have both worked super hard to make all of this happen, so thank you everyone for watching and your continued support, and enjoy the rest of the stream. Have a great day.
All right, and we're back. That was an amazing talk. As I anticipated earlier when we talked about Rareş talk about the distribution, like end-to-end tests, like you I personally have like a love-hate relationship with them because like I feel like they're good or nice to create because like they're usually easier to create because they're so high level. But then once you hit CI, that's when it kind of starts hurting because now you have like that huge Playwright or Cypress end-to-end test that run against your like all the features and use cases you implement in your app, and that's that one big block, right? So I love what Altan showed us there, like the whole concept of test atomizer. That's how we call it, right? Like test atomizer.
Yeah. This is something really dear to my heart. I could talk about testing, in particular end-to-end testing, for a long time, because I think there's the benefits of this are like unspoken. How critical I think end-to-end tests are and how valuable they are. The downside has always been they're expensive because they take time to run, and like there's considerations that you have to have for where you run them and how you run them. But when you bring in tools like what we have here, like honestly, this is the perfect example of combining the two big things we're launching this week, like Project Crystal and NX Agents together. Like by itself, it's kind of cool that we can like shard out these tests automatically for you. By itself, it's cool that you can distribute these tasks. But when you combine these two things together, so we say, hey, let's create like all these different individual tasks for each one of your files for your end-to-end test. And by the way, now we can also have like 20 agents that you can run. So you can run like in the time it used to take you to one end-to-end test, you can now run 20. That's huge. Like you're still gonna have to pay the compute, but as far as time goes, that's a game changer in my mind. So I'm
I still remember when we drafted out initial like Project Crystal, kind of when it was kind of born of like, hey, let's try this, like dynamically generating these tasks and inferring these tasks for project. And it didn't took us long until someone, like I don't know who it was, like in that meeting was like, hey, but like look, that could be a game changer for the end-to-end test. Because like Playwright as well as Cypress have the ability to filter and just run one file. So we could infer that, right? And I remember, like, I think Jason quickly implemented some POC, and then Victor tried it out on his Interstellar repo. I think there's actually a link in our docs. Like, if you go to our docs, there's a short video where I remember, like, how excited he was. Like, hey, I tried it out. Like, it was like 90 minutes before. Now it's 10 minutes. On the new NX agents. And everyone was kind of like just taped together because it was in a very, very early POC. But it already kind of showed, like, what is possible, right?
Right.
And
so this was actually I think this was me that kicked this off, Juri, because back when we were doing the Nx Conf in Phoenix, I was actually taking one of my own repos and like doing this but without Project Crystal, and it sucked.
With the inference API.
No, there's no inference API, right? Excuse me. So what we had was I had a generator that would actually go in and manually add these tasks to the project.json file.
Oh, I see.
So every time it was like part of the CI run, we'd actually run the generator to make sure that your project JSON was in sync with all the different files you had, all the different spec files that you had. And that way we could create an individual task for each one of these things, which was really cool because the savings was there, but it was so like ornery to work with that it was like it's not worth doing. When you unlock something like Project Crystal here, where you can just dynamically define your task graph via these plugins, it's so nice. This is absolutely a huge game changer, especially combined with NX agents, like we mentioned. We actually, I think I can talk about this now. Capital One is now using the test atomizer with their end-to-end tests, which had been taking them a significant amount of time. And now being able to shard these things down to a per file basis and being able to allocate a lot of agents, they're able to really cut down on their CI times from that, because that's the thing about like when Rareş was showing all the different blocks for like tasks that you needed to run, end-to-end is usually like that big.
That's the big one block. Even in project there was like things are going where like, hey, maybe we could split them, right? So people started like splitting them up by feature areas or something. So at least like you can kind of break that big single block into smaller blocks. But it was kind of like a workaround because in the end you wanted to have like that one end-to-end test, and it's like potentially right. And it was also just try to work into like the caching aspect and effect and distribution aspect on CI. So that being now implicit is cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's jump on the next one. I don't want to have people wait too much. The next one on the list is Mr. James Henry, which is going to talk about NX release, something I'm super excited about as well, because like we talked about that quite for a while, and this year finally it happened, and we approached it and implemented it. We had it already released, I think in September, like one of the first versions. We kept refining it, doc feeding it into our NX repo, so you can check that out there as well. So
Dog
yeah.
feeding.
Dog feeding.
I can't verbify that, but yeah. We've been using it. We've been using it ourselves. That's what
We've been using it. So if you want to see it live, check it out also in our Nx GitHub repo. All right, folks, enjoy the talk.
Check it out.
Hi folks, I'm delighted to be back again today to talk about NX Release. NX Release was a tool that we announced back in October of last year, and I'm pleased to say that we've been working through the early access period for it, and it's now ready for everyone to use. We support lots of different approaches to versioning and publishing, and we have a brand new programmatic API for NX Release that I'm very excited to show you today. So we had the NX Release CLI introduced with the alpha, and we've been hard at work making it the best it can be. But we realized that the true power would come in unlocking the heavy lifting from NX on our side, combined with any custom requirements you might have on your side. The best way to achieve that is therefore through scripting. And so that's where our programmatic API can come in. So no matter how complex your workspace, no matter how varied your requirements, hopefully there is a form of NX Release that will work for you. Today we're going to start with the NX Release command, which is a new overall command which involves the versioning, changelog, and publishing steps all in one. We will briefly mention some of the subcommands, so you can run just NX Release version, NX Release changelog, NX Release publish individually if you wish, and we will migrate over to using the programmatic API for maximum power and flexibility. There's so much good stuff I won't have time to cover today, but please check out nx.dev for the documentation. We're going to continue working on that and adding more and more practical examples for you to be inspired by. So here we have our workspace. We're using npm in this case, but this works just as well with yarn and pnpm. So we have our workspace's configuration that specifies our packages, and the only two things we have installed are NX.js plugin and NX Core. We have an awesome package. This is depending on the utils package, which also lives inside of our monorepo. And we also have a private package. And private in this sense means completely excluded from our releasing process. NX is capable of versioning private projects, even though you won't be publishing them. But in this case, we're just illustrating how we can use NX Release to exclude the project completely from consideration. So the way that we do that is we have our release config inside of NX.json, and we can say projects, and we can use any of the matches we're used to from NX Run Many here. So we can give project names directly, for example, awesome and utils, to target just those two projects. Or we can say everything with a star pattern, and we can say except private. So we can say not private. So again, all of the matches you're used to, like tags and directories and project names, they're all available here inside the projects array. Let's use awesome and utils just for explicitness. And now we're ready to run our NX Release command. The NX Release command will do the versioning, changelog, and publishing steps all together. So let's run dry run so that we can see a preview first before making any changes. And what's going to happen is we're going to get this useful error down the bottom. And that's because we have never run NX Release on this repo before. So we don't have any historical information, for example, in the git tags to know what the existing version would be. So now we'll run it this time with -- first release, and this time everything will work. Our dry run will preview everything successfully. So we chose the minor bumps. We have 1.2.0 now, and we can see that it's detected that we have a dependency relationship. So it's not only updated utils, but it's updated the usage of utils inside the awesome package. So awesome package JSON receives two updates, the version itself and the dependency on utils. Our lock file would be updated as part of the run. We would stage those package JSON changes, and we would generate a change log. In this case, we didn't have any commits which showed what changes we made. So we'll just get some text saying that it was a version bump only, as well as committing and tagging the changes. We didn't publish anything because we were in dry run. But this time, if we remove dry run, we're going to action all of those things that we just saw a preview of. If we don't want the interactive prompt, we can say specify equals minor to just tell NX Release straight away what we want. And this time, you'll see we'll get a prompt for if we want to publish. And if we accept that, we will go ahead and actually publish these packages. In my case, I'm running a local registry on localhost, but this would be the npm registry output as well. Now we can look at our files on disk and see that the changelog has indeed been written. The package JSON has been updated for utils. Importantly, it's not been updated for the private package, so it's still version 1 there. And the awesome package has likewise been updated, both in terms of its version and also its dependency on the utils package. Let's go back to our NX JSON now and add a property for controlling the version phase of the release process. What we're going to do here is we're going to inform it about the fact that we like to use conventional commits. So instead of us having to imperatively tell NX Release, hey, I want to bump to a minor version, or I want to bump to 15.2.3, we're going to use conventional commits to inform NX Release about the changes we've made, and it can then derive the bump that we want to make. So our tags and commits so far are that our initial release of 1.2.0, and we only have chores so far in our Git history. Obviously, if you were adding NX Release to an existing repo, you'd probably have existing commits for features and fixes, but in our case, we only have some chores. Let's run NX Release and dry run again. This time we use the shorthand -d. And as you can see, our output has changed now. It's saying there were no changes detected using the conventional commit standard. So now we've successfully enabled this conventional commits mode. NX Release is attempting to use our commit data to inform about any bumps. And in this case, because we only have the chores, there are no bumps to be made. Let's instead now come in and add a README just so we can add some form of change and commit those changes. So let's add a README to the awesome package, and let's claim it's a feature. We're adding an awesome feature to the awesome library. So let's run NX Release in dry mode again, dry run mode again. And so this time we have the minor bump with the Git history detected. Therefore, our 1.3.0 is propagating through. All these changes we're familiar with at this point to the package.json files. However, this time we also have a nicely formatted changelog file. This is because NX Release has a built-in changelog renderer that you can actually replace with your own custom one if you wish, but it has its built-in one which can understand your commit messages and print some nicely formatted markdown. Let's repeat NX Release, this time without dry run mode. We'll go ahead and accept the publishing step again, propagate everything through. And sure enough, we'll have everything we've got used to at this point with our package.json updates, changelog updates, lock file updates. Everything gets done for us in one easy command. We can also check out the changelog file on disk to just see the final effect of that pretty printed markdown. So we can see our awesome feature. We can even see that as a contributor, I'm being thanked and tagged in the changelog output. This is especially useful when we're on GitHub, because we can tag the username of the user and they will appear. So let's open up GitHub now and let's look at the actual remote repository for this release and for this project that we have. So if we want to actually go ahead and create a release on GitHub, we can actually do that with NX Release. So we can come in and add a changelog property, because it's during the changelog phase of NX Release that the changelog and therefore GitHub releases get generated. And we're going to alter the defaults of Workspace changelog to opt into creating a GitHub release. So for this, we need to update the Workspace changelog property and set the create release option to GitHub. More version control providers will be supported in the future, but for now, GitHub is the only option for this. So this time we'll run NX Release. We'll still do it in dry run mode, because the dry run will also be able to preview the URL of the GitHub release that we would create. Now, when we first do this, obviously we've already published everything and created a new tag. So we need to add a new commit that the conventional commit standard can be picked up, can pick up using the parser inside of NX Release. This time we'll pretend we're doing a bug fix, so it will only be a patch release that we're looking to do. So we'll update the README of the awesome library again. Running NX Release in dry run mode gives us our expected patch release and gives us our formatted changelog, but we can also see that we're now previewing a GitHub release in addition to the changelog file on disk. So we will get the URL that would be generated for us. If we refresh GitHub, we can see nothing has been created because we are indeed in dry run mode, and we will be getting the content of the markdown on GitHub as well when we run NX Release in non-dry run mode. Let's go ahead and do that. We can get rid of the prompt, by the way, for the publishing step if we proactively pass skip publish. So we've done that here. And you can see at the bottom, skipped publishing packages has been applied. So we can, if we know we don't want to publish, we can pass that proactively. Now we've bumped our patch release. And if we refresh GitHub, there we have our GitHub release ready for us. It's been created using an appropriate tag. It's the patch that we're expecting from our bug fix. And here's the tagging that I mentioned of our username. So now I can see myself has been tagged as a contributor. This is nice for building up a sense of gratitude for your users if they're providing fixes for you. And this can be disabled in config if it's not something you personally want to include. So we've seen then the power of the NX release command. We've discussed that it's versioning, changelog, and publishing in one step. And obviously in these common cases, that's really good because that means we don't have to worry about the individual pieces. But what about in more complex monorepos? What about when we do want more control? Well, we can reach for the subcommands, NX release version, NX release changelog, NX release publish. But we have another even more powerful tool in our tool belt that's a first-class member of the NX release family, if you like, which is the programmatic API. With the programmatic API, we can let NX release still do all the heavy lifting, but we have the full power of scripting to create any and every workflow that we want. So we can leverage that by just literally writing some JavaScript. We obviously could use TypeScript if we have TypeScript wired up in our repo. In this simple repo, I'm just going to use vanilla JavaScript because that's what I have available to me. But we can still leverage TS check in VS Code to get some feedback from TypeScript from the language service. So if we want to use NX release's first-class programmatic API, we can require it in from NX/release. The thing we can bring in there is 3 different functions: release version, release changelog, and release publish. We can actually require or import the release command as well, which would be the overall NX release that we've seen many times in this talk so far. But usually if we're using the programmatic API, it implies that we want more granular control over the different phases of releases. So that's what we're going to use here. We're going to split releasing up into its 3 distinct phases. This is our usage. We have 3 async functions, so we're just going to await all of them. And they each take in a config object with the configuration. So you can think about this as a mirror of the configuration arguments we pass to the CLI variant. This time we pass in options using a config object. So let's use version, and we'll specify that we're doing a minor bump. And it's a good idea for us to be able to control whether or not we're in dry run. Let's set dry run to true by default so we protect ourselves in our script from accidentally making changes that we aren't yet ready for. And release version is actually going to return some data. One of the things it returns is workspace version. This will be set in this case where we have all of our packages being versioned together as an overall version for the workspace. We'll set dry run on our changelog command, and we'll set dry run and verbose on our publish command as well. As you can see, we're actually passing that returned version into the changelog function. That's really important. So the changelog knows what it's targeting for its generation of changelog information, as well as generating tags and creating GitHub releases, all of that kind of stuff. So now we have the programmatic API wired up. This is a full and complete example. We've set every command to be dry run. We're not bothering with verbose logging, and we're doing a minor bump. This obviously is not going to be that great for us going forward because we want to be able to control that minor bump and the dry run option and the verbose option. So let's instead lean on yargs as an example of passing arguments from the usage of this script. So I installed yargs at the root of the workspace, and I've now just got some examples of wiring up yargs to control these important flags. So we have the version flag, the dry run flag, and the verbose flag. I'm going to set the default of dry run to be true, just like we have hard-coded before. And so this time I'm going to pass options.version to propagate that through from our yargs. And I'm going to set dry run and verbose based on those yargs arguments as well. The great thing about this is now we're letting yargs do the hard work of passing the CLI arguments. We could obviously write that logic in another framework, or we could write it by hand on process args, and we could add that code ourselves. Yargs is completely optional. It's not tied to NX release in any way. But personally, I find it quite a useful tool for this. So now we have our options wired up, and now we can use this script and pass arguments to it. So we'd invoke it with node release.js, and we're going to invoke node release.js with a version argument so that we can make the appropriate bump. So this time we're going to say patch and just make sure that everything is working. And as you can see, the output is exactly as we had before when we were using the CLI. We've got patch filtering through. We have our bump of 1.3.1 to 1.3.2. We had our changelog. Because there was no commit involved, there's nothing to generate. So we get that standard message, which is also customizable in config, exactly what it will print when you have no changes for the changelog. And that's shown end-to-end that we're now working. What about when we remove the specifier for version? What happens then? What happens when we want to lean on our conventional commits? Well, we're going to get this error in the programmatic API because we're not passing through any version data to the changelog command. in order for the changelog command to understand how exactly to generate the changes, it needs all of the information from the version execution being plugged into it. So the other thing that the release version function returns is a project's version data map. This is a map of the different projects in your workspace and the old versions they had and the new versions they received, as well as the dependent projects, the relationships between your different projects in the workspace. So now let's plug that into the release changelog function as well. And now it will have everything it needs in order to run the full end-to-end process, including the conventional commits information. So now when we run this again, we will see that we've attempted to use conventional commits. So just like we saw before, and because we've applied no commits, there are no changes needed right now. So now we've restored things back with our much more custom in control mode with this script. We've got it right back to where we were with the NX release command, where we didn't have as much control. Now we can take this as far as we want. So let's add an example commit. So we'll add another example feature into our library. Now that we have the feature, we can run node release.js again. This time we'll get our minor bump that we're expecting from 1.3.1 to 1.4.0. And everything is looking good in our dry run output. So because we've got dry run enabled by default, we're going to need to tell the script, hey, we don't want dry run mode this time. So we can pass -- dry run equals false to override the default of true. Obviously in your own script, you can make dry run be false by default. It's just in this example, when I set up my Nx config, I went for it being true to just protect me. This time we'll look at GitHub, and sure enough, now we still have the creation of a GitHub release based on our NX.json, our release config. Our two releases that we created on GitHub are now both there next to each other. And so we really can do anything that NX release CLI can do, we can do with scripting. And that's obviously really powerful, because now we could do custom things with this that the CLI can't just magically do for us, can't know about our specific use cases. For example, we could invoke these commands conditionally. We could make changes to these arguments before we pass them into the various functions. We could toggle dry run or verbose based on certain conditions inside of our scripts. We could set it based on environment variables or certain things to do with, for example, running on CI or certain things around different branches, things like that. So now that we have our working example and our script is useful, how can we take this further? How can we make this into what might be a realistic flow for somebody who likes to do provenance information for NPM packages, for example? This is the ability to sign your payload and have it show up in NPM as a little check mark, showing its traceability all the way through to its original commit. Well, for that, we would need to run the publishing step inside of GitHub, specifically GitHub Actions. We can't run that publishing step on our local machine. So in order to do that, we'd obviously need to get rid of publish in here. You could obviously make this conditional as well. You could say if in CI, then run publishing. If not, run it locally. In my case, I'm just going to get rid of the publishing step altogether from my script. So now my script only does versioning and changelog. And now I'm going to add a new GitHub workflow. I'm going to call it publish.yaml. And I'm just going to add some boilerplate that I've created before. So we're going to add a special workflow here, which has got a workflow dispatch action, which means I can create a button in the GitHub UI. And importantly, I'm also going to trigger it when a release is published. I'm going to give it special permissions to create an ID token, because that's needed for GitHub provenance information. I'm going to check it out with all of the tags available so that it can see the previous versions. And I'm going to run those subcommands that I mentioned, NX release version, so I can apply the version that comes in from the tag, or sorry, from the release, or comes in from the button press. And I'm going to run NX release publish while I'm setting some environment variables. So for example, my NPM token to authenticate with NPM and config provenance to enable the provenance information. So now if we add a chore for this to represent this workflow being added, we can persist that up to GitHub. And what we now have is a new workflow available to us on our GitHub Actions. So we can see that workflow by clicking on all workflows over here. Because I've got a narrow window, it's not showing in a sidebar, it's just available in this dropdown, but we can bring that up now. And here we have our button that we can run a particular version. So I have this input field generated from my YAML config where I could imperatively create a release if I wanted to. But what we probably want to do most of the time is have it be triggered from our script. So let's add a new commit that will necessitate a new release being created. Let's add our feature once again. Now let's run our node release script once more. We won't run it in dry run mode. We'll actually create the GitHub release. And because that's filtered through, we now don't have any publishing information at the end of our workflow as we expect. And now we've created our 1.5.0 release. Because we created that on GitHub, it's triggered our publish workflow. Now, I'm running with a slightly modified NX copy here just so I can have a green status here. But technically, our release has failed in my example because these aren't real packages that I control. So I've not been able to authenticate to publish these packages. If you were doing this actual step in your copy of NX, this error would cause the whole process to error, so you'd have this be red. But this was just for illustrative purposes. This is what it'd be like if your publishing succeeded. In my case, I don't have the right to publish to the awesome package or the utils package. So that's why that would be an error inside of the process. So here we've covered what I think is a really good workflow. This is a workflow that I apply myself personally on projects such as TypeScript ESLint, Angular ESLint. We've also seen it work well on the RxJS repo and a few different others that have adopted NX release already. Being able to control things locally, run things in dry run mode, see previews of everything, but then ultimately create releases on GitHub and trigger workflows is really, really powerful. And you get that provenance information filtering through. As we covered, we're running the subcommands in our workflow here with release version, release publish, but you could, of course, use your release.js script and have conditional logic down the bottom here to only run publishing if something is true. And again, this balance of the programmatic API and the CLI that you have available to you should give you the ability to set really powerful workflows that match your needs for your monorepo. Everything is often slightly custom, particularly in the enterprise. And so this hopefully will give you a great tool set to be able to work towards your requirements. That's all I've got time for today, I'm afraid, but there's so much good stuff I didn't have time to cover. We support fully independent releases. So today, all my examples covered the case where the monorepo moves in lockstep. We really like this approach at NX. We find it just helps with the mental model of the workspace, the simplicity of knowing that these packages go together. They therefore have a matching version. But not everyone wants to version in that way. Not everyone has monorepos made up of packages that are strictly related. So in NX release, we fully support independent packages. And again, check out the documentation to learn how to do that. We also support non-JavaScript publishing. NX release doesn't actually have any specific knowledge of JavaScript or the NPM ecosystem or anything like that. I've shown off before a prototype that we have of Rust publishing, but there's no reason why any ecosystem can't implement versioning and publishing using NX release. The way that you power that is through a plugin, just like everything else in NX. And we provide the NXJS plugin to provide the JavaScript and NPM material, but the community could provide other plugins for other ecosystems and languages, and the existing plugins for Rust and .NET and things like that, I'm sure will implement the necessary generators and executors for NX release in the near term. So again, super excited by what we've covered today, super excited about what we didn't have a chance to cover, and I look forward to learning about your experiences with NX release and seeing you on GitHub to find out how we can make things even better in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Well, that was really cool. I love seeing just when James was doing just the NX release command, just how nice that looks now. Like releasing packages is like one of the hardest things, I think, unfortunately, especially inside of a monorepo. Even without a monorepo, it's unfortunate just because of the weird array of things that has to happen. Like you got to bump things in the file system because your package JSON needs to like have its version updated. You need to, like, if you're doing change logs, that's another step you got to figure out. You got to figure out how all these things go, like in what order, and then when does it go out to the registry? It seems like it's so complicated. And I know for me, that's definitely been a thing I've struggled with in the past when trying to figure this out, especially in monorepos where, you know, you're trying to do a lot of stuff with a lot of packages at the same time. So I think Juri, we were talking about how like in the past we've done similar things. Like it's totally possible to have done this using like custom NX executors or just creating some target called, publish or something like that. And then you could do like NX run many publish. But that was never really that satisfying because especially when you need to actually drop commits in there to actually like version something, like that gets tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, it is. And as we also talked earlier, like the surface, if you look in the end, right, is not that big, right? The API surface of NX release, for instance, there's so much thought going in behind. As you said before, like even just the ordering in a monorepo, right? If you run the publishing command, like you want to make sure you publish them in order such that you don't have a package out which depends on the package which is not published yet, and then in the middle the product fails because it's going over the network, right? So at least you want to make sure that those packages go out, don't have dependencies on packages that are not out yet. So there's all this complexity potentially going on. So I think we kind of tried this out for a while on our own repo, on the NX repo. But before, I think we just had a custom script using release it or something. And so we moved it over now to NX release. And this is also a bit like how the whole programmatic API got born, which I think will still be needed. I like the out-of-the-box experience of just running NX release. But like real-world scenarios are complex sometimes, right? So you want to make sure you have the programmatic API where you can collect stuff, move files around maybe, and then just trigger, hey, here's the version command. Then you need to change the command, or even not to change if you don't need it, right? So yeah, it's really, really cool stuff. And we should also mention there is hey, sorry, go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say with the programmatic API, definitely interesting for those more complicated monorepos where like especially I think there's other functionality we've built in for this, but if there's something special or something in particular you need to do for one of these packages or something like that, definitely
it just gives you freedom. I feel like freedom to adjust for your situation, not being locked in and saying like, oh, I cannot use it because I need to do stuff in between like versioning and releasing or something, right? So,
well, just letting people opt out of the CLI too, and instead like, hey, like here's the same functionality, but exposes like a JavaScript API instead of like you need to use the CLI for this. But having them sourced by the same thing, I feel like it just gives people more options for how they want to structure their workspace. So
and what I wanted to mention before is like it's not that NX didn't have a way to release before. Like obviously you could custom code it, but it was also like a package was pretty much known in the community, which is from JS Cutlery, I think, JS Cutlery-somewhere, as you find it on GitHub. And we've been talking to them actually quite a lot during the process of creating NX release, because the whole NX release thing, as James also explained, like it's extensible, right? So the idea is like we provide that information for JavaScript, but even the JS Cutlery team could like maybe if they have done some stuff that they can now rip out and like put their stuff on top of the NX release command to basically get rid of some of the maintenance burden that they have, but still provide a maybe slightly different way to publishing. And people love that package. So there's definitely a place for that. And it's not that NX release would replace or should replace all of these. You can still keep using, even change sets or release it. Obviously, like it's up to you. But this is more like our way of like helping out on the publishing front as well.
Right.
Cool. So now we have a special announcement, I guess. You were responsible for that.
I'm excited. Should we roll it?
Should we roll it? Let's go.
Let's roll it. Announcing the newest product to be added to the NX Cloud lineup. Tusky, a powerful artificial intelligence equipped with the context of your workspace, commit history, and historical build timing data. Here at NX, we're already using AI to help you understand NX. Our chatbot is already in production today, and this has helped thousands of our users with their questions about NX. Our engineers will build upon this experience when creating Tusky. Tusky will help you with day-to-day tasks in NX Cloud like debugging errors caught in your CI pipelines or diagnosing issues with caching. Empowered by historical knowledge about how long your automated build steps take and how they depend on each other, Tusky will be able to automatically size your agent usage, spinning up and tearing down machines mid-pipeline to match compute needs for any given PR, allowing you to simply choose whether to optimize for time or for cost. Tusky will leverage the unique context of your workspace to automatically detect and provide valuable organizational insights for your business, as well as provide architectural suggestions and visualizations for your codebase. Tusky, coming spring 2024 to the NX Cloud platform. Sign up now at nx.app.
that was an amazing announcement, I guess. Finally, we're diving into the whole, or jumping on the whole AI train. I mean, we did already with the chat, right?
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
was
we
around
kinda
for
did.
quite a while.
But I definitely think there's a lot of stuff going on with AI where people are just jumping on, like it's the new, crypto or the new NFT or something like that in some ways. Versus, I think our approach is actually really quite measured in that, where it's not jumping into the hype, but it's really delivering value. Like the thing that I'm most excited was the one from the middle of that, where we had already seen Rareş talking about how you could just easily adjust your work size or like the number of agents that you provision.
Yeah.
Excuse me, for your CI pipeline. But now with Nx with Tusky, you kind of getting access to all your historical data and all of your knowing about your workspace, because Nx knows about your workspace. We can really optimize. Excuse me.
Yeah, the whole
We can really
cost
optimize
saving
there.
approach. I think the whole cost savings that potentially come out, because the initial version that we saw with Nx Agent was like, hey, distribute on 5 Linux medium JS machines, right? So that is still static, right? In sense, like if at some point you see 5 don't make it, well, change it to 10. Now, obviously, we have the possibility even right now with Nx Agents to say, hey, here's my dynamic file of different PR sizes, but still that is kind of static, but with a more fine-grained level. Basically, you just classify between small, medium, and large, but you still classify, right? You have those 3 categories. But the thing that you showed there, potentially being able to say, hey, we start with 3 machines because we know you're running first the building and linting, and those are kind of good. But then you come with all those end-to-ends, and those will be scale up in the middle to 10 machines and scale down again once those end-to-ends are done. That is amazing, I feel because that really... the cost saving of just running those machines, basically, that you can get into in the run as the run progresses, basically throughout the various tasks. That's pretty cool.
Right. Well, and Nx agents kind of enabling us to dynamically come in and add more agents, or maybe we lose some agents to errors along the way, and having that kind of fault tolerance there. But the capabilities are there. But I think that's actually a really hard problem to solve for an engineer. That's more of almost a data analyst problem, figuring out how do we best allocate for this, and to be able to provide a tool for our customers to be able to use that seamlessly and kind of effortlessly. Oh, I'm really excited for that, because it really just plays into our whole thing of don't worry about managing your CI. Already we have it so we're going to figure out the project graph for you, so we can dynamically figure out the dependencies and all this stuff. And now we just added another layer. We're optimizing on a whole new dimension now with Nx agents, and combine that with Tusky. So
100%. Even I'm personally also excited pretty much about the whole product analysis capabilities that we can have. I mean, we talked about that for a long time on Nx Cloud, and we have some cool ideas, because the question that comes up always is hey, how do I structure my Monorepo, right? It's always well, it depends, right? It depends what type of domain areas do you have in there, what type of splitting do you apply, right? So being able to do that, we had some ideas already in the backs of our heads, basically, of how you could do that, but clearly with all the other stuff going on in CI, that got deprioritized. But I feel if now some of the AI stuff on top of the historical data of runs that we have can figure out patterns, that would be really cool, I think. And a major help as well.
And another interesting thing is just looking at our history. We started out as consultants, kind of in this monorepo space, right? And so we were able to really give the customers that we were working with really good hands-on information, some interesting analysis of their workspace, and give them ideas here's some things you can do to optimize this workspace a little bit. And as we've gone from consulting to now being more focused on building up products like what we're doing now, it feels like some of that has maybe been lost a little bit, the more personal touch and being able to have intimate knowledge of someone's workspace and be able to provide really good suggestions based on that. This is actually a tool, I think, that where we can maybe start trying to do that at scale. And our AI sort of task force here, I think, is really capable of delivering on a good experience for people that hopefully will be super valuable for our customers. So
100%. Cool. Should we wrap it up?
Let's do it.
The last one. Let's do it. that was Launch Nx Conf, basically. I mean, tomorrow we still have a wrap-up stream, right? Tomorrow there will be a live stream with you and me, Victor and Jeff joining, so we can talk a bit about what happened during the whole week, stuff that we launched, exciting things, and allow people to like ask live questions. Feel free to go ask right away as well in the chat, right? People from the core team are around, so to help out and ask questions, dive deeper in some of the topics. We are also going to have like a wrap-up blog post, which is probably going to hit next week at some point. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is at NX DevTools, or our socials, which is also at NX DevTools, to not miss out on those news.
Awesome.
It was fun.
Juri, this was cool. We should hang out more often.
Oh yeah, 100%. Thanks, Zach.
You got it, man.
Bye,
Thanks, everyone.
folks.